essentially is going to let Ukraine grain
Right.
shipments go out. However, Ukraine also is selling drones to Ukraine for their their Bactera, with their drone stuff.
Right.
Meanwhile, Russia's saying we're best buddies. Turkey, let's further up. Turkey doesn't want Sweden and UN. Like
Right.
they're in a bit of a rock hard place, but it's more of a they just have lots going on here.
Yeah. Yep. So the big tech stories that we're all here to discuss. Are we ready for that? Or is there
Yes.
anyone with a non-tech story they want to highlight before we move on?
Yeah, Washington, D.C. has another mass shooting over the weekend. One boy,
Oh,
15-year-old boy, was killed and three others was injured. I think it was at an unpermitted music gathering that someone opened fire.
We'll be
At this
hearing
Chris,
about
were
point,
this
you
I'm
there?
I'm
every day
I'm
until the
I'm
next
like
set of elections.
literally wanting to say nothing new here. This is becoming way too common.
how
Yeah,
how old?
skip.
How what? Give me some demographic details of the shooter, please.
Chris, you know?
All I
Teen,
know is that
preteen.
this is going constantly in the background. The only difference about is whether or not we hear about it or not, and we're hearing about it now because it's politically useful. The moment that
Thank
politics
you, Chris.
changes, we will not hear about it again.
Thank you for saying what I didn't want to say. Thank you.
So the New York Times says that a 15-year-old is killed in 3 hours shot in gunfire at the DC Music Festival, known as Mochella, a free street music festival. I guess they're not giving any details at all about the shooter.
Yeah, the suspect. No, I didn't see the detail about the shooter. The suspect, no details as well.
Huh. Well, in a way, that's actually very good that they don't.
Yes.
Um, okay, so the next one. Oh, hold on.
But then, Tyler, if they don't, isn't that typically because it's a class that's protected, like someone under 18?
Could be.
Also, it's somewhat unusual that we have instant access to information, especially for chaotic events. Like, that's kind of new last, 10, 20 years. It used to be you had to wait weeks for these sorts of things.
Hmm.
I'm sad to say, but what they're labeling as, and granted, any loss of life is bad, but what they're labeling as mass shooting, it's kind of sad that it has to be defined. But in the U.S.,
Right.
technically, a mass shooting is where it's over
Yeah, we
four.
need to have a bar somewhere.
But I mean, there's always been, sad to say, there's always been shootings in the U.S. I mean, keep in mind, we lose at least for the last 30 years anywhere from 11 to 15,000 a year in homicides. I mean, that's like a U.S. Army division or so. That's a couple of aircraft carriers. So, it's just getting more attention on it too. So,
There's only been like 3 years in United States history where we haven't been at war and basically inflicting violence somewhere in the world. It takes a whole domestic infrastructure to support that. Training, recruitment, weapons production, etc. One of the things I think is really a disconnect is that Americans often think foreign policy is different from domestic policy, and drawing those lines too distinctly makes it kind of hard to put those into context. But when you put essentially that America has a military empire, it makes a lot more sense why we're having these issues domestically. Until we address essentially the larger context there, we're not going to make a whole lot of progress domestically.
Hmm. Okay, so we get to go into the tech headlines here. I need the air horn as tradition requires. There we go. Top story today says after suspending withdrawals on Friday, oh boy, another crypto exchange is suspending withdrawals. Babel Finance says it has reached preliminary agreements on repayments of some debts, helping ease liquidity issues. After pausing withdrawals last week, Celsius asks for more time to stabilize its liquidity. They're all going through this. They don't. Yeah, you're going to have a massive cascading effect if everyone starts doing. It's like a run on the banks, essentially.
Yeah, they should read what happened in the Depression when they started pausing. That just
Well,
creates even more
unlike
concern, you know.
unlike then in the Great Depression, they had like the feds like jump in and save everyone. Like that's unlikely to happen in this situation.
Well, that's why this is an interesting problem. I think it represents an interesting social experiment because it is by all means a transfer of wealth, and it's kind of like playing in the bathtub. If you play around too much water will leave, but it's not to say that other people won't come in now. So a lot of people, for example, are buying Bitcoin now when those who bought it higher perhaps lost. So it's a weird kind of almost like a cross product or chain product of some sort, so chain roll. But yeah.
Money
Where
isn't
did you
real. We're living
find
in an
a lot of
illusion.
people, Eric? Where did you see a lot of people? Where do you find those people? Who are your
Well, you can.
friends?
So for one of the people from Shark Tank, for example, said he was buying the dip and that's if you have capital right now, it makes sense to buy the dip because I think the interesting concept about cryptocurrencies is they tend to have a good rebound, if anything. So if the speculation does restore, I think it's likely. So it was surprising to hear Kevin O'Leary talk about investing in Bitcoin now in the dip when he originally said it was trash. So
He's a character. He's like it's persona. It's not
Attention
real.
seeker.
Well, if you had a
Like,
bought, would it be 36 hours ago? You would have been buying it at 17 and a half, and it's now 20 and a half. So it's like, I think there is, yeah, to your point, people are definitely making money right now. Like there's 3,000 and like a number of hours.
But you only make money if you have the liquidity to exit.
or hold on for dear life, as it were.
Okay. Oh, shoot. Oh, all right. Next big story. A related story from the Wall Street Journal. The total value of all cryptocurrencies has gone down by roughly $2 trillion, or two-thirds, since Bitcoin hit its all-time high in November of 2021. And Bitcoin fell under $18,000 on Saturday, kind of breaking through what many thought would be the resistance point. And that's to me the really super strong resistance point is going to be 10,000. So let's see. Um,
I mean, it's rallied back to 20. It'll probably drop again. I think we'll see it test that resistance point quite soon.
yeah. Okay, next big topic is from the New York Times. It says Apple employees at a store in Towson, Maryland, vote to unionize, making it the company's first U.S. store where employees voted in favor of unionizing. Roughly two-thirds of the employees at the store in Towson, Maryland, voted to join the union.
Tyler, that's interesting. I wonder if Apple would do what Starbucks, I heard recently, might be doing, which is closing the store that won one of the union votes.
Right. Well, Walmart did that, did do that years ago, but they did it the same night after the vote finished, before they even arrived to work the next day. Yeah, for Starbucks, that's trivial. Even for Apple, that's trivial. To be determined. The next is Telegram passes 700 million monthly active users and unveils something called Telegram Premium, which will let Telegram users follow up to 1,000 channels, send files up to 4 gigabytes and more for $5 to $6 per month. Telegram has amassed 700 million monthly active users and is rolling out a premium tier with additional features. Next is interviews with members of Peter Thiel's inner circle describe how he came to the decision to leave Facebook's board, a departure that was years in the making, from the Washington Post. And then the next is from Bloomberg. Crypto broker called Voyager secures a $485 million loan from FTX's CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, and others. And FTX's CEO says that the Federal Reserve's decision to raise interest rates led to the current crypto crash, resulting in risk recalibration for investors, which, to unpack that for you, means now that there are interest rates and no longer zero interest rates, there's less speculation, and the crypto bubble was a sort of, in some sense, a sort of epitomized manifestation of speculation in its kind of purest form. um, yeah. So now that there's going to be less speculation because there's no longer zero interest rates, then you're going to have the popping of the crypto bubble, which we're certainly seeing. The next is Solend Labs, a quote-unquote decentralized borrowing and lending protocol on Solana, overturns a controversial vote to commandeer a whale's account. So the article yesterday over the weekend was that Solana's sort of sister decentralized borrowing and lending protocol called Solend Labs had voted to commandeer one of the big accounts, which the kind of colloquial term is a whale. A whale is somebody who holds a whole lot of one coin. So this one big account, or whale, their account was sort of frozen to prohibit them from withdrawing, because if that whale withdraws, the whole ship will sink. And you can imagine the metaphor of a boat where, somebody who takes up 80 or 50% of the mass of the boat quickly and exits the boat could capsize very easily, and that's a apt metaphor in this case. And they knew that, so they couldn't risk that whale leaving the boat for fear that the whole thing would sink. So they froze that account. It's kind of wild shit. It's like a bank freezing not all the accounts, but just the biggest accounts to keep the bank afloat.
That's why I appreciate you. I think you added in the quote unquotes around the decentralized in that, but thanks for doing that.
No, the article did. I'll be back in 1 minute. Go ahead.
Oh, sounds like Tyler has an island-based emergency to cope with.
No, he asked Ben to continue.
Hey, sweetheart.
Sharing your thoughts, Ben.
Yeah.
Yep. How are you?
Yes.
Well, I don't know.
What you do?
Still very disappointed with. I mean, it's cool. There's a shakeout now, and I think we're going to see the men separated from the boys. But I'm disappointed with supposed professional financiers throwing money into things.
You send me a message on
the way they
Facebook?
have with seemingly such little due diligence. But if there's no interest, the height of speculation, life's become too easy. Fuel, food, everything else was too abound. I think maybe this is what humanity reduces itself to. But I'm kind of glad we're having this crypto winter at the moment. To be honest, it's good to see.
I have a related question, Ben.
No, go ahead, Aram.
Hello, Aram.
Okay. Yes. So, what
Hey,
would
you're
be
right next to me. No need. You can whisper. Actually, you're right next to me, so we can talk really quietly, and nobody else. If we talk really quietly, nobody else will be able to hear us. So.
I'll be envious. Don't do that.
Sorry. This
What do
is
you
a
got for me,
question
Aram?
We're
about
safe.
the use of cryptocurrency. Sorry, Bibi, you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, but I was just shocked by Ben. Aram, go ahead, Aram.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, don't want to interrupt anyone. I had a question regarding the cryptocurrency debate that people are having now. I know about the Bitcoin being an asset, but what about that use case scenario that was presented earlier, that the cryptocurrency is like an alternate currency source, in light of what feds and government regulations are going to do to cryptocurrency. You still believe that it's an alternate currency, or just
send me on Facebook?
an asset to hold?
So if you're to believe great books like the Bitcoin Standard, which is not really anything to do with Bitcoin, it's just a history of money. It talks about the evolution of a money being a collectible first, kind of nice to have stamps, rocks, whatever you want to collect. For the geeks, Bitcoin certainly was that and still is that to some people. I would probably almost fall in that camp. I'm most interested in it because of its technological beauty. From a collectible, things might become a store of
Verb
value.
to do.
Enough
Oh,
people collect stamps, coins,
maybe
rocks,
now
Bitcoin,
she's going
then
to
maybe
learn
it's a
this
good place to
verb
store
to
value.
do,
I think that's where the
like
center of gravity is with Bitcoin. There's probably most people
Tom.
in that bucket. There are also people using it for the next phase of monetary evolution, if this model's correct, which is medium of exchange. It's the idea that if enough people are storing value in something, gold coins in their pocket, whatever, Bitcoins, then maybe they'll start transacting with them. That's certainly happening in some places and not happening so much in others. It's certainly happening in El Salvador, Central African Republic, and so forth. And then eventually, if enough people are exchanging value with a
Verb
particular
to
thing, then
do.
you might want to price in that, right? So pricing gold coins in Bitcoin, in dollars or whatever. So there are some people in all four of those buckets. The center of gravity globally is definitely sitting on the store of value. So that's, I think, if you look at Bitcoin through that lens, it makes sense. If you start looking at it as today as just a collectible for total nerds, then I think maybe it's past that as a whole. And if you're trying to think of it in terms of everything should be priced in Bitcoin, then not yet. That would be the kind of stock boring answer that most people who know about Bitcoin could probably anticipate before I started speaking. Oh, and I forgot to whisper.
Are you done speaking, Ben?
I'll take that as a compliment. Yes, it
No,
did
just
sound more like
joking
you were
with
in
you.
pain and you were waiting for it to end. But yeah, that's cool. I'm done.
No, no, no.
Ring. Who wants to ring?
Aram, any more question, Aram, or anyone else?
Yeah, I was just wondering, the prior case was being made for cryptocurrency as an alternate currency that's going to replace fiat currency and all. So now we are scratching that idea completely and just
Now I have
holding
my event.
Bitcoin.
Everybody's
Has
talking.
there, or
Nothing's changed, Aaron. Not at all. I'm just saying that if we zoom out, then this is where we are in the evolution. And if we're expecting it to be that everything priced in Bitcoin, everybody buying
Remember,
instant
I talked
Bitcoin
to
is
you
too
like a
early
three,
still.
4 hour
In
ago.
the
I
monet,
go to on the train to a
if the
meeting. I
this
do like a
what
4
this
meeting,
path to
meeting, meeting,
monetization
meeting, meeting,
is
meeting.
correct, then we're generally at
And
the
try
stage of
to get
store of value still.
money for my
And I think
event.
the fundamentals of it as a store of value, as a
So
finite
can
form
be
of money
next
whose
September.
policy you can't change, is as strong as it has ever been. Um, so yeah, and obviously if something's
I have
cheap, then
no, not in the hotel.
well,
In the
the
app,
problem is that people
same like in
confuse the
Thailand
current
every night.
price with the fundamentals of the thing. They might say to themselves, well, if it's supposed to be a store of value, why is it so volatile? Well, it's just where
Same
we
time.
are in the price discovery mechanism, in my opinion. It may go to zero, and we're all wrong, all those Bitcoin people. But you never know the future. You can only just make an
Yep.
educated guess, and that's the best I can do.
Yep.
Well, that's
Let it go down. Let it go down to pre-COVID level first, and then monitor from there. By the way, Katerina, I've been trying to bring you up a few times. I couldn't. So you try to jump out and come in again, or restart your app. Maybe we can try again later. Okay, go ahead. Who wants to speak?
Yeah, but just for some perspective, the universe itself will eventually go to zero as energy density goes to zero in the limit of time going to infinity. But something for perspective, the cryptocurrencies have maybe
Okay.
half a dozen $1 trillion in value, perhaps even less so now. But compared to the fiat market, I think it's between 100 and 120 trillion dollars. So it's quite a low fraction, but as time progresses, I think to Ben's argument that it would become more stable with time. But we're just very early on in the process, relatively speaking.
$3
Okay,
trillion
I'm
down
back.
to 1 trillion.
Oh, welcome back.
Yeah, the 3 to 1
The,
is purely on Bitcoin, Nicholas, right?
no, the
Or is
industry.
yeah, or the
The
industry is it?
industry went from 3 trillion to 1 trillion, yeah, or whatever it is today. But again, I think as we said many times before, you can't hedge $100 trillion market with a $1 trillion asset. That's not going to happen.
Okay. So next up on the topics is Microsoft's Surface Duo 2 is a compelling dual screen phone. Yada yada yada. The next is WhatsApp rolls out new privacy control settings to all users, giving them more control over who can see their profile photo, their about details, the last seen status, like what time you were last seen, and your status message. WhatsApp rolling out new privacy control settings to provide users greater control over who can see their photo and other details. Next, from Bloomberg, a profile of a Chinese smartphone maker called Realme, which has a 16% market share in India, so it's growing. Wall Street Journal reports that JD.com, one of China's biggest e-commerce sites, reports revenue from its June 18th shopping festival rose 10% to $56 billion, which is the slowest growth since 2017. So, 10% growth is bad now. So, Chicago-based Elevate K through 12 schools, which help school districts alleviate teacher shortages by virtually connecting teachers to classrooms, has raised $40 million. Oh, that's interesting. Remote teachers filling in for schools who can't get teachers. I'll chime in with a few thoughts on that one as somebody who taught in some of America's toughest schools, and it very literally, very statistically, America's toughest schools, which the reason they accepted me, even though I was not even legally qualified to do so, is because they don't have a choice. It's because those schools are incredibly challenging to teach at, and no teacher who has any option will take it generally, and that leaves the school in a very precarious situation to accept any sane adult to manage the classroom. Um, and I assume there are times when there are no adults in the classroom and it's just a functional kind of sitting room for an hour. Anyway, so this concept of remote teachers in physical classrooms, virtual teachers, is wild. It's a really wild concept, because then you would have teachers in a lot of classrooms that normally they would not uh, feel safe even attending in person. The next is Tel Aviv-based company JIT, which automates product security for developers, announces $40 million. That makes sense for a security company to productize their offering to other developers who don't specialize in that. That's a lot of how apps get built anyways. And those are your big, boring tech headlines for today. India lifts a ban on MasterCard. Oh, remember that drama we covered going back many months ago? After showing satisfactory compliance with local data storage rules, aka letting us see everything.
Did you read out the story about Rostec?
No, what's that?
I sent it in the back channel on Twitter.
Okay, let's see. Going into the tweets here. Here we go. As promised, Russia's government-linked Rostec Group has announced the development of a blockchain platform called Cells, spelled CELLS, capable of replacing the global SWIFT system to process international payments. No doubt they started working on that the day that the Europeans mainly were voting on booting Russia out of the Swiss system, out of Switzerland, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And so they had to come up with their own alternative, and now it's being announced. Yes, Russian.
They started working on it the first invasion of Ukraine with the initial sanctions, but yeah, I mean, this is just exactly what we said, that the split of the different webs, of the different currency systems, and
Right.
the assault on the dollar hegemony.
Right. It says, the second paragraph says, Russian banks were excluded from the SWIFT system last February due to sanctions imposed by Western countries in response to the Russian-Ukraine war, which basically makes it very difficult to bank with Russia. It's the interconnections between the banks internationally. And I think most people know this. When you have a SWIFT code for your bank, when people are doing international transfers, I use it nearly every day when my Swedish partners need to pay money to my American bank account or my Thai bank account or whatever. So, yeah, if the Russian banks no longer have SWIFT codes, then Russian citizens can no longer receive funds to or from, especially into their Russian bank accounts. The announcement of the new SWIFT alternative there in Russia comes shortly after the Russian government said it was considering adopting cryptocurrencies in international payments, backtracking the Russian central bank, which proposed to ban cryptocurrencies last January. Well, thank you for that, Nicholas.
So really, the point is that we are going through this shakeout. It is part of the political process. It is part of the democratic process versus the autocratic process. And for those who are thinking about crypto, they need to stop thinking about it as a currency alternative and start to thinking about it as the rails of the new financial system that is not controlled by any nation state, and that is why it is valuable. So, I have always noted that I believe that Bitcoin and Ethereum are just prototypes, and that the right solution will be public infrastructure, and that people will naturally have an incentive to use that public infrastructure because it is not controlled by corporations or nation states. So this is just yet more evidence that the evolution is coming, because once you have those that stand outside of the system that you can interact with, what you will see is that there will be many actors who are more than happy to interplay with the Russian system and the Chinese system, because it suits them for whatever reason and whatever motivation. And so this is going to happen, and that's why, if anyone wants context to why cryptography is relevant, it is because of those two other factors creates the necessity for the third, which does need to be people powered.
Okay, now we go into the tweets. Let's see. No, there's the Wall Street Journal's Christopher Mims. He's kind of a well-known tech journalist. Wrote an article saying, a look at the safety and economics of autonomous trucks, as Aurora and Too Simple say they plan to have commercial trucking services in the U.S. by the end of next year, 2023. Yeah, the whole thing's going to very quickly go to...
Right. So it's all of a sudden this stuff happens, but as soon as you get this, you're going to get this clash between those who have and those who have not, and the group of have-nots is going to be everyone who's living paycheck to paycheck in a world where potentially you continue to have supply-side outages, not because of monetary policy, but because of economic and political policy. And for those that are not self-sufficient, nationally, there is going to be, increased economic pain through inflation. So big nations are going to be favored here.
Yeah. Well, the truck one is an interesting example because autonomous trucks is about to become a very real thing, and that's a lot of jobs. And
14 million driving jobs in the US.
Yeah. Then you've got, especially if, for example, Starbucks baristas start unionizing and you start seeing autonomous coffee alternatives that aren't dependent on union labor or any human labor. And by the way, that's coming in a serious way, and retail's shifting not only to e-commerce but to automated commerce. And it's like at the moment when people are already getting a bit unsettled with how they're not able to make a decent living, and the automation is really not going to help that situation. in fact, it's going to really exacerbate that friction in a very poignant way.
It's
And
going to deeply affect, humans are going to have to rise up against the machines. And when they rise up against the machines are owned by capital. So this is a
right,
classic labor capital,
yes,
evolutionary leap. And that's, what the markets are registering. This is the end of zero interest rate policies. This is the beginning of the next cycle where rates are being raised, which is why liquidations are happening, as we talked about previously, cascading through the system. And that it means that you will potentially have high prices because of supply side issues and deflating asset prices because of capital repricing. And so this is a new era and a new game. And those who have capital will yet again benefit, and those who have labor will have to agitate for higher wages because otherwise they won't be able to survive, especially as 43% of Americans are surviving on revolving credit facilities via their credit cards or buy now, pay later schema that are going to be relied upon more and more as people try to temper their consumption. And this is the aim of government, of course, is to try to avoid a recession and avoid the political outcomes that come when people are financially suffering. This is at odds with the Fed's mission, which is to kill consumption. But killing consumption doesn't seem to really be the problem on the ground. It is the issue of supply, not demand. This is an interesting conundrum.
I think businesses are in a interesting area now. I don't know if you remember, Tyler. Going back to the comment you made was, I'm not sure Starbucks is going to automate, because I think when you go into Starbucks, my personal opinion, Starbucks coffee is not the best coffee, so I don't go to
mm-hmm.
Starbucks. But when you go there, it's because of the experience, right? The barista,
Mm-hmm.
all that.
Yeah,
Years ago, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was two things that happened. McDonald's has tried a lot of these, and automating the kitchen was one of them, and there was a huge backlash on that. The bigger one here in Chicago, and I think they tried it in a couple other markets, was they had the drive-through being routed to, I think, Costa Rica and India. So when you came up to the drive-through, it was somebody from, it was blatantly somebody from another country, and there was a huge backlash. But they're dealing with the average McDonald's has something like 60% staffed constantly. So we're in a climate now where businesses can easily make the argument that I had no choice, and to stay in business I had to automate and I had to replace people with it and reduce my because I can't staff, and now it would be acceptable. So the thing with the trucks, we keep on talking about 80 to 100,000 truck drivers shortage here in the United States alone, and it's just going to get worse. We've already dropped the age of a truck driver. So if you guys don't know, here in the U.S., they recently dropped the age of a commercial truck driver can now be 18 years or older, where it used to be 21 at a minimum. So some of those truck drivers that are out there is going to get a little bit scary. But you can easily make, and companies and states will probably push for more automation to fill that gap, and it's going to be acceptable by the public.
yeah. Well, not only that, I saw a report from the hospitality industry where it was a major report, a very huge survey from hotel guests from 2021, asking them what changes they would most like to see, in the hospitality experience. And number one was they no longer want to have any kind of human interaction during the check-in process. They want to have a faceless check-in process, and they no longer want to talk to the hotel staff in person. They want to do that through SMS, essentially, or some version of chat. They would greatly prefer that. So it's by the way, I mean the Google chat bot, headline last week that it had reached sentient levels of intelligence doesn't bode very well for lots of people, even people. I mean, we're very, very quickly shifting from local work to remote work in places where with much lower labor rates, like as you said, in developing countries that have decent English ability for chat support. But that will quickly become automated as well. So, wow, I mean, what do you do? By the way, it's even very easily conceivable that bot chat support will even become superior to low wage human support, even especially in the US, for example, which because you know human support, when you call Verizon or a big American telecom company or any big American bank or what have you, or even when you
I think
call,
what
yeah,
you're accurately trying to say is that there was this meme or this show in the UK called Computer Says No,
right,
and she would tap in on the keyboard and it's like computer says no, and so what you're evidencing is that a human is really just a sentient computer
right,
in customer
an agent,
service because they have
yeah,
no discretion to do anything. So all
right,
they're doing is language processing, and oftentimes the language processing of a computer is going to outperform a human that has no autonomy to make any decisions because all they're trying to do is get you through a gateway. Computers can do that pretty well.
right. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me that in 10 years, or even less, honestly, around 5, you'll have bots who have better grammar and conversational style and a more pleasant demeanor than your average human agent. So, what do we do at that point? So, and especially as the humans are unionizing and demanding pay raises and strikings and all of this, it's just really going to quicken the transition to their inevitable replacement. It's a really precarious scenario, and it does. I don't see how we avoid the obvious conclusion of this graph that of these lines, where those lines go when you project them forward is some sort of revolution of some kind. I don't see any way around it.
I don't think it needs to be a revolution. I think what people realize is that they're in a closed loop. This is what's happening is that we are um, filling in the information so that, just like we just said, a human is acting like a computer in customer service and they're not doing a particularly good job. And in fact, it's more frustrating for the human interacting with them because they have this frustration that this human can't do anything for them. So you may as well be talking to a computer. So that's closing a loop. Now, when you close lots and lots of loops, where we will get to is that humans are the unit of consumption. Machines can't consume resources like calorific resources, etc. So that's when the human realizes that they are the unit of consumption. That unit of consumption is worth, in America, the median household is making $75,000 in income. It is netting 56,000 and is spending 6,000 on a revolving credit facility. 43% of Americans, right? So who are borrowing using credit cards. So when you look at the $56,000 of spend, all of that money is predominantly being spent with an S&P 500 company. You're not buying from a lot of local markets or from each other. There's not many subsistence farmers in, Detroit. So ultimately, that's the unit of consumption, and that has a value baked into it. Now, in current markets, the value baked in terms of operating margin is about 10%. So that's the profit. So if you assume that that person is spending, let's call it $63,000, the operating margin is $6,300 of opportunity, just roughly speaking, right? And so the loop that closes is that you realize that the only reason we're running any of these games is to supply goods and services to citizens at a price that they can then enjoy their lives. And so this is sort of the closing of that loop. This loop started in 1776 with the official beginning of economics, right? So this has lasted for a long time, and we're entering this new zone. And in this new zone, really you are a subscriber to life because you're not buying a house, you're not getting into that capital play. You're more likely renting. If you look at Germany or if you look at France, probably more Germany is a better example. That's a nation of renters. They don't even try to buy houses, for example. So this is, an evolutionary thing. And that, the question is, how do you want to play those games? I don't see the need for revolution. What the humans need to do is organize, and that's what unions are prototypes for. Labor organizations, collective bargaining, and when they realize that they're also a buying unit, and so if you're the buying unit, you are the selling unit, and if you close that loop, you say, "Oh, here's a way that you can have community currencies," and that's sort of really what nation states are. They're community currencies, and so you start to get this sort of reinvention. So it doesn't have to go to revolution. It could go to sustainability that says, oh, and we have a finite amount of resources on the planet, therefore we should probably be estimating consumption in a more accurate way. And if we do that, we can then, have a longer use of our planet, and we don't have to go to Mars with the billionaire lunatics. That's the opportunity.
Okay. Next up. So we're going into the tweets.
Tyler, did
Let's
you
see.
refresh your page? There's one on top that says Google says it bans gun ads, but it actually makes money from them.
Okay. And then there was a startup called Postscripts, which helps Shopify merchants do customer engagement through SMS. Raises 65 million. No doubt, it's also largely automated. So you're starting to see the automation of the e-commerce customer service through SMS, which, by the way, my own startup played in that space. Yeah, and indeed, just chat bots are gonna, man, like when you look at what's happening with Dolly, and whenever Google releases this, whatever the version of this,
They're getting better and better,
yeah,
chatbots.
yeah,
I
they
used to
definitely,
hate them, but once
yeah,
they get good enough, you don't hate them anymore. You see them
the,
as an efficiency.
exactly right, and that's my point. Is you might even prefer them to the human, who, by the way, generally calling human customer support in America is by no means a pleasurable experience either. Um, so I very much look forward to the day that the bot experience surpasses the lackluster human experience.
And you
But
will get a refinement of the human experience where you will value the ability to deal with a functioning human, but that functioning human will be paid a much higher wage because they'll be more of a concierge solving problems than they will be a functionary, automation.
this, well, it'll be the supervisor, because it used to be you talk with the human, you realize this human's an idiot, and then you demand to talk to the supervisor in the classic scenario. And soon the first stage humans will be replaced, and then the bot will ask you if you want to talk to the supervisor potentially. So, who's ostensibly being paid more to make actually make decisions? Yeah.
But isn't that the information? Like I think the authority they are giving to the customer support would improve the exact same way that they are giving data to the bots to make them better, right? At the moment, for me, it has been really frustrating dealing with the bots because they are just so inflexible. So for me, it's like, okay, to make them much better efficient, you need to give them a lot more data so that they can, they can perform better, which is the exact same thing. If they give authorities and training and other things to humans, they also would perform better. So I wonder what the
But the
difference
data,
is.
the conditioning data of just listening to those calls with the ability to pass the audio is training the computer in such a refined way, just like you do with you're training the computer with the capture pictures. Every time you're filling out a capture, you're training the machine. So recording those calls is going to refine the bots much more quickly than it's going to refine the humans, I suspect.
I do have a question here based on my personal experiences with these customer service agents, humans, or bots. To my personal observation, there is no longer a need to solve the problem that it's more about how much more time you can waste, how much you can psychologically tire a person so they give up on this idea of, for example, requesting a part that's broken or returning or asking for warranty and stuff. It's all about, playing a game where the person who seeks some sort of, response from the company is delayed forever, and there's no interest in solving the problem. There's no interest in satisfying the
100%
customer.
correct.
It's all about how long you can dry this person out so they give up. No
That's
longer.
like the inbuilt obsolescence mode, which is to
Uh-huh.
say, we'd rather replace it. This happened with washing machines, you'll remember, and with dishwashers. Fixing them is now a marginal cost, right? You got the
It-
guy to come over, it's $250 for the plumbing guy to come over to say you need a part, and you may as well replace the whole dishwasher, which costs $300. This is
Same
inbuilt
with printers.
obsolescence.
so with
Printers are
but
like
all,
that.
no, it's not about which product. I'm talking about the intention of these customer support calls and the way
Yes, exactly.
even
That's what we're saying. That's
the
what I'm
men.
agreeing. It's inbuilt obsolescence, just like that example in physical goods. You have that inbuilt obsolescence that you want to try and exhaust the inquiry, and there are certainly bad companies that do that, but good companies realize that good customer service is what retains and makes you want to work with them because you don't have those aggravations. Certainly that's my experience.
Yes, absolutely. So for those good company, you pay premium dollar. For example, the service for my Land Rover is absolutely different than a Toyota or some other company. Same thing with your appliances. If you are paying the top premium dollar, yes, you will get the service. But the rest of the people, if you call them and expecting a solution, never gonna happen. It's all about delaying the response and tiring you out until you give up and perhaps go and buy some other product. So it doesn't matter bot or human, the intentions have changed towards customer service.
You mean in the
It's not the
US?
intentions, it's the economics. Everything boils it down to economics in our current modality. Community or service or all of those issues are a slave to profit. And that has to be because those companies that are big in those businesses are operating on a quarter to quarter revenue and profitability targets. And that's why they're also driving the efficiencies in terms of removing humans in these processes because they are more expensive in the long term. So this is a cycle, it's another loop, and it's a loop where we have to say, do we like being in this loop, and is this the right loop, or are there other loops? Because at the end of the day, the purpose of all of this game is to be for the benefit of humans to enjoy life and hopefully sustain life on this planet.
I
Good,
dread for the
good.
people in the market sectors that's very highly refined and perhaps potentially called elitist service sectors. So, in hospitality, for instance, or even in something like health, there is still a huge requirement for personalized, really high quality interpersonal skills and service, wouldn't you say, Nicholas? So it's about market sector and who you're actually aiming at. Economics absolutely have a part to play in it.
So here's a direct experience over the last few days. I went to a restaurant in here where I'm staying, and there was the interior of the restaurant which was served by humans, and the garden was serviced by a QR code and an ordering mechanism, so that all you had was delivery to table, but no engagement. And the I asked obviously the server how it was going and who was whether people were struggling with the system or not. And she said we seem to be spending more time explaining to people how to use the new system that is really taking up our resources. But we're hoping that this will enable us to sustain the restaurant, given that we have a lack of staff available. So this is how people are coping and changing.
Well,
The
yeah,
model is
but
changing.
that QR code related experience was in light of COVID related non-contact service delivery, and I found
No,
that
no, no. There was
people,
fully. It was fully no mask, no nothing. It's not. It's.
no,
It
I
was. This
just
is just now, like literally just now
previously.
here in New York. No one. No one's cares.
Yes, it's not about the mask now, but during the COVID, that's when they come up with this non-contact kind of service, and I still prefer that to indoor dining experience. But my point was that how human beings are now getting used to of this new way of profit making by these huge companies and settling for less customer satisfaction, settling for less and less. Response from them, and we are being trained by bots or these customer service representatives because this there is a huge shift in terms of how every single penny is now being squeezed out of normal consumers, finding new ways to psychologically tire them over and over, so they are left with no other choice than to spend more dollar amount to get either a better service or just give up and buy another product.
Aram, I
The
agree
thing
with
is,
you there.
you're actually spot on something here that you probably doesn't know. Is that the thing is here that I was the CIO of one of the larger travel agencies a couple of years ago, and we were in investigation and looking at working with automated call receiving in the way we're discussing in here in the channel right now. And we actually did get encouraged by the provider of the system to put in extra delays on the collect call numbers. You let, and if you add 10 seconds here and there, it ends up in very many dollars in the end of the day. And one of the things that the firm I worked with, we didn't go for a collect call number. We had a 800 numbers to use US terms. But the thing is here that what we used it for was to get the, when you have a booking number with your flight, it's 6 or 7 letters and numbers that you need to have in the correct order, and having people with different background and different languages trying to get that through from a person to an operator can be a very tedious task. And the thing is, what we found out was that the robots were a lot better at getting and couching the person that were trying to get their booking ID correct, because since the robot actually could recheck against the database, if you entered 4 letters in a row that was not part of the database at all, the database of sorry, I must have a misunderstand you. You said Sierra Bravo Bravo, and there is no such combination. Do you perhaps have Sierra Bravo Sierra? So it can actually autocorrect and make it a lot easier to get this tedious task done. You are done.
Okay, Johan, I'm just sending you a chat in our DMs here. If you could see that.
Can I ask
Uh,
a question that takes this to a slightly different level?
okay.
This is Pat. It's still within the
Yeah, go
area of
ahead,
what.
Pat.
Thank you. It really is still in the area of robots and technology. I completely approve of and agree with the fact that robots and AI and all of that is going to provide a huge amount of benefit and service to our world. However, it does sadden me that perhaps that has implications for certain ends of various industries. So, for example, in the hospitality industry, yes, Nicholas, you were talking about those restaurants, but in the very high end, dare I say, elitist luxury market, and there will still be very, very rich people around. There will be still a level of interpersonal relationship with a human being that will be actually beneficial. And hopefully the
Absolutely.
luxury end of the market will be engaging with that, how they can make themselves unique and specific to continue. It does, of course, create a two-tier society of economics regarding travel and hotel stays and all that, which is very sad. But I think that's just got to be where it goes.
The personal touch will always characterize the best of the service providers, and that is until it becomes, easier to not interact with people. But I doubt that day is going to come in our lifetime.
Okay.
I just want to mention something. I'm not sure why, but in Asia, at least in Japan and Singapore, and I guess even in China, automation and robotics are actually taken quite positively. Because we have aging population in this side of the world, so those automation actually help and robots actually help to replace a lot of job that we couldn't find staff for, and it actually improves the efficiency and also don't have to deal with a lot of people issue. And just now someone mentioned about scanning a menu and order without human interface. I think even pre-COVID, I think in China, because of the WeChat Pay and the Alipay, they have been doing this for years, without anyone going to your table to take order. You just have to scan, order your stuff, and then they'll deliver to your table.
It's
I,
been around in
I
the
second
States. I
that,
don't.
Cheryl. We were doing that in South Korea well before the
Yes.
pandemic. And I would say that the luxury, the upper echelon, they also enjoy these amenities. There's less desire to deal and interact with human beings than one might consider. There's some level of experience that you have in getting straight service without having to deal with the nuance and the fluff and getting your service and getting out. Oftentimes you find high functioning people wanting that kind of experience rather than delaying the receipt of the acceptance of a product. They want to just get to it and get out. And so Korea, at least for that country, while I was there, I noticed that they leveraged it in a great way, and it's been exemplary. I'm not sure why we're not looking at the use cases there and applying it and waiting for calamity to strike before we do so. These adaptabilities are not necessarily going to shift jobs. What we find is that those workers are displaced initially, but then they acquire jobs that are far more reaching and more fulfilling over time.
Yep. It's booming here in Stockholm. The QR code at the table where it kind of puts a little web-based app on your phone without having to download a whole separate app, and you order from your table on your phone. And I imagine that the wait staff, well, it greatly reduces your need for a waiter to come take orders. First of all, it makes the ordering process much less prone to mistakes. And if there are mistakes, it's completely on the onus of the customer, anyways, because they made the mistake. And you don't have to deal. The issue I think with there's that we hear about this all the time, that there's not enough people willing to work as wait staff, and that's largely because the customers have become so incredibly unbearable as a result of everyone's kind of micro trauma, or in some cases actual trauma as a result of COVID, that they've become unbearable customers, and people don't want to be wait staff, and the wait staff have been replaced by these easily downloadable ordering systems on their phones. So it's a win. Everybody wins except for the wait staff, essentially. There's less cost for the restaurant. The restaurant couldn't find wait staff. Now they don't need to.
Well, Tyler,
And
sorry, like the wait staff still brings the food out. Like the restaurant that I love going to, at Oprah's restaurant. What's the name? The Farm Fresh, the food, Real Food Kitchen. They have this outside patio area where you have these scanners, and immediately you can place the order, and it's faster. Wait staff brings the order out, get your drinks and everything, and you still have the service. Only thing is, it's very fast. You don't have to wait. And then these people who are bringing your food, they already know what you want and stuff. So there's not that, communication in the beginning and the wait period from the top. But if you still want to have that experience of waiting for a long time, you can go indoors and have that experience as well. So waiting staff is still interacting with us when they are bringing the food out. It's just reducing a lot of complications in the beginning.
okay, so the tweets that we have here today.
Tyler, did you
Yes.
see the one about Winnie the Pooh
What's that?
from the list? the Winnie the Pooh. NetEase, I bring it
Uh-huh.
on top as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
NetEase delays the release of the, Diablo Immortal after the game's Weibo account shared a reference to Winnie the Pooh, a way to derisively refer to Xi Jinping. And Cartoon Bear is often used to criticize Xi Jinping and has been blacklisted by censors. So because of this Weibo ban, the stocks was down by 7%.
Okay. Thank you for that. The other tweets today, there's a whole bunch of them. Katarina has one from The Guardian about Nreal, which have made some VR sunglasses called the Nreal Airs, and they've done a review. They say the new augmented reality specs put a big screen in your view, and smart glasses with display is now widely available in the UK, but must be connected to smartphone to work. And Saudamini sends one from India that the Indian government bans 35 WhatsApp groups for sharing misleading stories. The orders for disbanding of the groups were issued by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology after it received inputs from one of the other ministries, and they're listening to your messages on WhatsApp and they're banning your groups. And then no doubt they're making note of who was in those groups. You can rest assured of that. And the BBC story that I'm sharing right now to the Tech News Twitter account, I'm retweeting Saudamini's tweet, and it says, a social media murder. What role did social media play in the murder of 13-year-old Ollie Stevens? The story came out 15 hours ago on BBC. A social media murder. What role did social media play in the death of a 13-year-old? So, I guess another question is, what role does the actual media, like BBC, play in the murders of many more people than this 13-year-old? I think the BBC might want to be careful with stories like this, because if people start calculating how many murders are, who's responsible for more murders, they might find out that mainstream media is more responsible than social media.
There's actually an interesting study on this. I can't remember, I read it a while ago, that says exactly that with regard to suicides. When suicides are reported, there is an increase in suicides because of the socialization of the idea, and that this is inherently has deep mimetics. Mimesis is people copy people, and so when you see I think we may have discussed this type of idea in respect of the school shootings, the Columbine the media storm that followed created the incentive for the next lunatic, and so the reporting of information affects the perception of the receivers, who are prone to thinking that that is a way to find identity, and much the same as why we were obviously in fear with the threat of terrorism and all of the issues of those acts as well, and the way that they're reported. And so this is about perceptions controlling behaviors, and the process of hormesis, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and mimesis, what monkey see, monkey do. And this is really a very interesting way of illustrating that.
This is not so known, but Sweden is one of the top countries in the world in the number of suicides. And since I myself have been working both as an ER nurse as well as a paramedic, I have had to deal with the consequences of this numerous occasions. And mainstream media in Sweden
Tyler, you're muted.
Yeah, but Johan dropped out, it seemed like.
Yeah. Yep. I think
I was
he's
just
back.
waiting for him. Okay. Sorry, Johan, your mic dropped out there. So, it's just weird to see BBC write stories like that. What role did social media play in the murder of a 13-year-old?
That's exactly why I shared it because I was like, didn't expect that from BBC.
It sounds
Yeah,
like,
but
I
it's
mean,
but this is it. It's a perception war we're in. We're in a narrative war. And there are, we went from news as impartial, neutral, credibly neutral information to partisan information based on the news channel. So this is, the evolution of media, social media. It is called media. And that's the argument about, is it a platform or is it a publisher? I think it's pretty clear that the algorithms have bias and therefore they are publishers in the same way that the New York Times has one position and Fox News has another. This is evolution of consensus making or sense making for conscious agents. And most people are not conscious agents. They are not aware of the information field nor the bias of that information field, and they move into reinforcing loops again of behaviors like you're seeing with people parroting ideas about inflation that they do not understand, and they go, oh, it was giving away free money to poor people, which of course it was nothing to do with that. So all of these things are narratives, and all of these narratives are seeded by those that want to influence your perceptions, and influencing perceptions have economic sponsors, and those economic sponsors are advertisers who want to find out what it is, what share of their wallet they can buy or sell you. So this is the system at the moment, and the system is changing.
there was an article over the weekend, and maybe you guys covered it on Friday, that TikTok was leaking data to China from the US. Did that come up on Thursday or Friday?
Not
I think
that
they
I
say they
know,
have
but
a backup in Singapore, and I think China can probably access it to Singapore.
No, I mean it was the top story on Saturday, and I
Mm,
shared it.
we didn't cover that.
Okay, so let me pull this up. This is, to me, one of the more interesting stories. It's weird that it came up on a weekend.
Yep.
So if I go back, let me see, 24 hours ago, 48
you will
hours ago.
you have it in our own back channel
Yeah,
because yeah.
I shared it in the back channel. Yeah, 3 days ago. Where did it go?
The interesting part here was that they actually have
Why
found
don't
that
you?
the information has been leaked from TikTok in a way that were, let's say it troublesome, and that actually there were chats that have been distributed by the censors and reposted on internal chat networks at TikTok, as well as getting spread out over WeChat and other platforms as well, both clips and other things that were not intended for a wider audience than the designated target. So yeah, this is troublesome, and it might be that our friend Carrot Face actually had some points in trying to block them.
So I found it, and it was the top news story when I shared it yesterday. So it says leaked audio from 80 or more internal TikTok meetings that ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, uh, ByteDance staff in China repeatedly accessed user data about U.S. TikTok users. Um, September 2021 to January 2022. It says for years, TikTok has responded to data privacy concerns by promising that information gathered about users in the U.S. stays in the U.S., but now leaked audio from more than 80 internal TikTok meetings proves otherwise. That U.S. user data is being leaked to China, and we can assume that means TikTok has access to your camera and your microphone, so China can use TikTok as an espionage tool in the U.S. For anyone who has TikTok installed, they can listen to your microphone, basically. Now, what that may surprise you, although it shouldn't at all. Uh, what is a and also what might surprise you and shouldn't at all is that who covered that story? Because immediately when that story was coming out, and by the way, TikTok doesn't deny it because they can't, because there's evidence of these more than 80 internal TikTok meetings of leaked audio. They can't deny physical evidence in the form of audio files of leaked audio. So they're not denying it. They're not saying, no, those audio files are deepfakes, or those aren't real, or those don't exist. They can't deny it. It's real. It's proof. They are tapping into your devices and leaking information from the US to China, as many people knew they or assumed that they had, and now we have actual hard evidence that they themselves cannot and are not denying. What is interesting is they did respond. They didn't deny it, but they responded by saying TikTok says it has completed migrating its US users' data to Oracle's servers in the US. Okay. TikTok has completed migrating US users' information to servers at Oracle's in a move that could address U.S. regulatory concerns over data integrity and the popular video app, blah, 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 blah. Now, what's interesting is who covered the breaking news revelation that TikTok's leaking information to mainland China. I got news for you. It was Protocol, the Washington Examiner, TechCrunch, The Information, Agency France Press, AFP, which is quite renowned, the New York Post, Gizmodo, Engadget, Barron's Online, Adweek, Mashable, Insider.com, and others. And Elon Musk tweeted about it, other people tweeted about it. Notice that I didn't mention the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, etc., Reuters, CNN, what have you. They're not covering the story. Why? And I've accused them over the many, many months of not fairly covering TikTok, have I not? Have I not brought up countless times how what TikTok is clearly egregiously fucking our shit up, and yet they're not covering it? And here we have actual physical evidence, and they're not reporting it. However, they did report the second story that I read, that TikTok says it has completed migrating its users' data to Oracle servers. Well, they're reporting TikTok's own published response of sorts, that everything's fine, everything's secured on US data servers, what have you. They report that. But people who read that don't even know why they're reading it. Without the context of the initial leak, you don't even know the relevance, the importance of why TikTok's announcing that they've completed migrating user data to Oracle, whatever. They're trying. So why are you puppeting and distributing and platforming TikTok's communications department and using your publication and reach to promote TikTok's message rather than letting people know that? And this question I'm raising becomes even more interesting when you realize that the BBC's article that they just did a few hours ago is trying to question social media's role in a murder, the social media murder, the murder of social media.
Right. So this is this narrative war, and the settlement that the détente that was come to about TikTok with the previous administration was to have these servers hosted in America and this sort of separation, and they had that whole, shimmy sham with the CEO and all the other, window dressing. But at the end of the day, behind everything is this clear understanding that there are different internet. There is a Chinese internet, there is a Russian internet, there's American internet, etc. Europeans don't yet have their own ideas together, which is why they're an interesting attack surface. But the fact of the matter is that you need to have reasons for creating the lock-in, which is going to be a lock-in with Google and Amazon and Apple into that corporate web that we currently reside in, that we call corporate surveillance and surveillance capital. So you've got surveillance states. We always said there was three different groups. There's surveillance states, China, Russia, a lot of the Middle East, etc. Then there are surveillance capitalists that are operating within the Western liberal democratic system, operating within the dollar hegemony as media comes together with finance, comes together with the quantified man. And then you will have within democracies unions and things like that, and law that emerges with regard to private AI, public AI, and the limits of the law and corporations as they get the benefits of Metcalfe's law and computational asymmetries. And so all of this is about that emergence of these new systems because they all have their own financial rails, and those financial rails with differing levels of privacy and interoperability where the tax base resides. That's how our current system works, on the basis of a monopoly on violence and taxation. And they've got the monopoly on violence down, but they can't use it because they're afraid of the retaliation. So violence, threat, massive defense budgets means nothing, because Russia is saying, listen, even if you just start to fuck with us, we're going to cut off your oil supply. And the Germans, are shitting themselves. So, that doesn't work. So that's out. We can't actually use all the money we spent, all the trillions of dollars that go into this defense systems are just worth nothing, right? Because no one's willing to use them. So that's one whole group of thinkers. And then on the other side, you've got the taxation, which is only possible if you control the money supply. And as the system fragments, that means the take for governments to recycle into building countries and building nation states gets trapped into autocracies and oligarchies, and in the case of America, a technocracy. That's the problem. So these are just narratives that are playing in that context, in my opinion.
So the next one is from BB from Reuters, that Japan set to put fines against Twitter and Facebook and Google if they neglect the domestic registry. The Japanese government is set to levy fines against 48 tech companies, including Twitter, Facebook, and Google and others, if they neglect Japan's domestic registry. What is the domestic registry? I'm not exactly sure. BB or Cheryl might know.
Yeah, I have to read the Japanese version to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Registry?
Yeah.
As in, okay. I'll check. I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. Oh, wait. I think I got the answer right here. Hold on one second. Because it was broken by Nikkei Japan, is the one who broke the story. It says the Japanese government set to levy fines a total of 48 companies looking to enact its own strict measures. In early June, the Ministry of Justice reiterated its request that some companies register their global headquarters in Japan by June 13th. The ministry said it would ask courts to fine the companies if they still have no intentions of registering. If IT companies have their headquarters registered in Japan, consumers would have an easier time filing lawsuits. When problems such as defamation on social media sites occur, the government believes proper registration is essential to protect customers. So they have to register their official address so that people can complain, essentially. Okay.
No, it's a free speech issue.
It says overseas IT companies are thought to be holding off on registering in Japan over concerns about increased corporate tax burden.
They're
Address
saying
this.
it's the tax burden. The government is saying that it's about having recourse because no one in Japan is able to sue someone in the US without incurring a giant amount of cost. And therefore, they're saying if you want to operate in our market, you need to register, which is
Yeah.
what you would expect. And they want to control all of that. Just, that's part of surveillance capitalism. If you want access to this market, it's regulated. We, the government, regulate it. We control it. And therefore, we have a limit on free speech in that country because what is created by that asymmetry where you can't come and sue that company is that in the example they gave, right, is that you would have some recourse about libel online or whatever else, right? That's what they gave as the example in social media. So this is part of the same narrative. It's just about the free open internet versus nation state internet and access to people and the ability to tax that revenue on that household.
Okay. Next up is from Phil. The headline that I'm retweeting now says that China wants to censor online comments. A draft update of rules would dramatically increase the power of China's censorship machine, but platforms will pay the price. On June 17, that was 3 days ago, the internet regulator in China published a draft update on the responsibilities of platforms and content creators in managing the online comments on their platforms. Oh boy. One line stands out in
It's
this new
amazing, these
draft.
conversations, how they lead to each other, but no one knows what the next story is.
All online comments would have to be previewed before being published. Oh boy. Oh dear Lord. Can you imagine being the company that gets hired to review all of those? There's a $1 trillion opportunity right there.
Right, but no one will say anything because they know they'll be being censored, and therefore they won't say anything. It's
Ah,
about that's how you
And that's the
silence the
goal.
people.
Yep.
yeah.
Exactly, you silence people by letting them know that their words are being observed. That's why free speech and free open source software is so important because there is no vector to attack. There is no company
Right.
to register. There is nothing to. That's the attack surface that is proposed. That is the basis of the blockchain and why we can do this. So that you have an opportunity.
Open source software.
There you go. That's because they don't believe in free speech, but we do, and that's why at the West, where the democratic process remains and the opportunity remains to influence our future, we can use the Constitution because it is so inflexible to change the Constitution. And so, free speech, privacy, and intellectual property rights, and everybody's content of their humanity is IP, and IP is protected as Ken checked my reference to this under the Constitution, and so that's a really big thing, and people are going to see that more and more. And as the saying goes, when the tide goes out, you see who's bathing naked. And the revelations that we're seeing, and all these stories, are of the same thing. It's the narrative is being unpeeled, and you're seeing who sits where. The mean kings, the mean lords, the false prophets, all of this narrative that's the same as in ancient times. It's just people dressed in different clothing. It's archetypal, and so we have a moment where if the people can understand the power that is in their potential hands, then they will have, skin in the game, and they will realize that they are the, the customer and the potential owner, because networks and network effects are what the VCs and the governments tax, and network economies are the future of humanity. And these can cooperate and collaborate at scale using permissionless, trustless, cryptographic systems. And that's a big moment. We're approaching that moment.
And that's why I'm so angry that all these just for the money scammers got involved in Web3 because they have now caused the movement to somewhat slow down because they've taken the focus off collaboration and joint ownership and put it on, money
That's
scamming.
that's right. That's the nature of networks. is that the first movers are the most highly tuned to the economic incentive because humans seek incentives, and those people are finely tuned. The biggest, scammiest people are fine tuned to that. And so they all rush there, including all of our friends in the All In pod and people like that who were basically pumping and dumping on retail, garbage, Ponzi-nomics that was prototyping this new internet of value. Because that's what it is.
But
It's,
it's
you know,
unfair because I jumped in to help women artists become, you know, independent through their own artwork on Web3. And,
right,
you know, now that all has been slowed down because they've
of
all
course.
got burned.
But that's the hormetic experience. So in the in the conscious agent, the self-sovereign conscious agent theorem that's on my in my avatar, the hormetic side of the human learning process is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as we said before. And so every market, when it matures, goes through the hormesis, the pain of realizing you were swept up in the flotsam and jetsam of this tide, and that from it comes a group of people that say, look, when you're looking at a project, if it's owned by a company, I've done this with Tyler myself. He's like, sends me all these projects, and I'm like, just quickly look. If it's owned by a company, if there's developer rewards, if there's a rent seeker in it, that's the hallmarks. You've got to learn the hallmarks, and people are going to learn those hallmarks. So that's part of evolution, and you're always going to have a leading edge. But as these technologies refine, they are going to, especially with zero knowledge proofs and with all the other technology that should be part of those primitives, this is where we're going. There is going to be an opportunity, and the hallmarks will be a truly public infrastructure that enables the free, open web to re-emerge, and even to be able to protect oneself from oversight of nation state players. That would be the real unifying moment, but that still is cryptographically a step away.
I would like to read
So
more
that's the
about
future.
this. Nicholas, I'd like to read more about this. Can you put something in the back channel or send me
You
something?
just have to go to my Twitter feed, and it's boringly filled with links and threads that refer to all of these documentations and all the different protocol features that are enabled by these primitives. Because that's what this is. It's not about replacing the dollar. It's not about being a world computer. It's about giving people tools that they can control that enable them to own the primitives of the new web. And that web is meta to nation state, and it can unite people. And that's, the future which awaits us. And many collaborators, and there's no, company or government or any of that stuff. It's just altruistic, altruistic yet rational market participants who are building, understanding what we need if we're going to emerge from this competition between state-based surveillance and corporate surveillance.
Okay. Next up from Katerina. I'm retweeting now to the Tech News Twitter account. Researchers use CRISPR technology to create a map tying every gene to what? The Human Genome Project was ambitious initiative to sequence every piece of human DNA. The project, okay, no, hold on. To create a map tying every gene to its function. Yeah, exactly. And that's why the startup that I'm advising in Stockholm called Arcus AI is so freakishly, fantastically interesting because lots of labs are trying to map every human gene to its function. And there's still a lot more to go. But once they're all mapped, you're gonna be able to know which negative genes you have, and you'll be able to have a rather accurate risk profile for your propensity for having every type of cancer, literally every type of cancer, literally every type of disease, so that you can preemptively work to avoid them because of how epigenetics works. It's not just because you have the gene doesn't guarantee that it will become expressed. You can
Sorry
once
to
you
sound a
yeah
slight note of
yeah
caution there, but
yeah
when Watson and Crick were initially searching for the genome, they excluded the mRNA and the protein, and there was a lot of information in those fields. And furthermore, on mapping the human genome, they thought that they would find maps for all the proteins. And what they realized was that those creation of those different pathways come also from influence from the biome. So I think when you have to we have to understand the biome alongside the genome. And I think I've sent you the note before, which is you reviewed for
And
Nature.
there's also the
Is
non-encoding genes.
yeah. So just a note of caution: it's the genome alone is not going to give you the solution to all problems. The pathway is created through the biome.
All right.
There's another caution, and that is that there are a lot of um, variants of a lot of genes that persist in relatively high frequency that are thought to be either a big zero or even pathologic. But if they were clearly pathologic and affected the reproductive rate of individuals carrying it, it would likely um, be selected out by natural selection. And so a lot of what we currently think of as bad genes that are preserved with a relatively high prevalence have benefits that we simply haven't discovered, or it's unlikely that they would remain at a significant prevalence within the human genome population. So I think that to the extent we can identify one-to-one matches between genes and proteins and deficits like abnormal hemoglobin, thalassemia, and so forth, that clearly have really adverse consequences for the individual and for their reproduction, that it would be relatively straightforward. But it's likely that a high proportion of what we think is neutral or negative, but running with a significant prevalence in a population, have unknown benefits. And there are many, 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 many examples that we do know. So rushing into genetic engineering without a much deeper understanding than we'll have in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be revealing in terms of those underlying benefits of genes that are thought not to be good.
Yeah,
Weren't you talking about this, or we talking about this in a science room over the weekend about attention deficit disorder and bipolar disorder, that they have not been selected out because they've survived because they have some utility for the people who have them?
From an evolutionary biology,
Standpoint. Yeah,
standpoint
that's
on principles, yeah, exactly, and that those are behavioral examples, but there are many other examples. Like there is a gene whose sole the first scientific discovery that 23andMe ever published was related to a gene of unknown significance until they discovered it offset the risk of Parkinson's associated with another gene. So I'm glad you brought it up, Dr. Francine, because there's gene interactions, there's gene microbiome interactions, there's gene epigenetic interactions. The complexity of what millions and millions of years of evolution has created is way beyond our current understanding. And so, while I'm a huge fan of synthetic biology and the use of CRISPR for clear cut, if you've got a substitution in this base pair, fixing it will relieve your suffering and disease. I'm a huge fan of proceeding down those pathways. I think it gets very dangerous. And just as one example, the Chinese scientist that thought he was going to win a Nobel Prize for inserting genes that confer some immunity to HIV went terribly wrong, and I think he's still in prison in China. There are really safe things that we can and should be doing. George Church, for example, one of the greatest pioneers in genomics, is finding really healthy genes that have more than a couple of copies
and increasing copy number as a method of improving health. So those are when you're increasing copy number of a gene that is a dominant gene in a population and known to have beneficial effects, that's relatively safe territory. So there are safe territories, there are clearly unsafe territories, and there's a whole gradation between those. So the regulation of this space is probably going to be by largely case law surrounding failures.
John, also HDL. Remember, you used to thought it very protective, but more and more data suggests it doesn't have that effect. So
And by the way, the one, the Hong Konger who changed the gene, she was released this year at um, March, April 7th. So he's released after 5 years in the prison.
Next up from BB from South China Morning Post, a Chinese court rules that a car sale made using a digital currency is invalid as Beijing's unrelenting crypto crackdown continues. The Shanghai court voids a car sale contract saying that cryptocurrencies don't have the same legal status and should not be circulated.
Oh, I remember the last time we read another related news. It says like two guys, one guy sued the other to give back his Bitcoin. At that time, uh, also the Shanghai court decided the other guy need to give back the one Bitcoin. And in that news, it explains that the Chinese court now recognize Bitcoin as legal asset. Otherwise, you don't need to return if it's a trash. But this is another example that the crackdown on the Bitcoin is continuing. So don't put your money on China's Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think they have their own currency that they might be preferring people use, perhaps.
Oh yeah. Other than
Oh, they
later.
do. Oh,
Oh yeah.
oh, well, that's
Sorry.
interesting.
Yeah, not bad.
I wonder if the story actually has anything to do with that, but the article doesn't really mention it. So, okay, so the next one is from Katerina, that a molecule produced after exercise could stave off hunger. And the molecule decreased appetite in obese mice, anyways. And the question is, will it work in humans? Well, I'm sure there's plenty of humans who are eager to test it out. Um, a molecule that mice, racehorses, and humans naturally produce after exercise decreases appetite in obese mice. The blood of mice that ran to
People,
exhaustion.
people here in America.
The blood of the mice that ran to exhaustion contained high levels of a modified amino acid. Obese mice injected with a high dose of the molecule ate half as much food as those injected with saline, scientists report this week. If the findings are validated in people, the researchers say that this molecule could one day be used to treat obesity and cardiovascular disease because you would stop gorging yourself like a foie gras goose. So you just need a little more of this molecule. So the next one is from Saudamini, that a study shows electric vehicles could be charged on the go via peer-to-peer systems. So you can plug one car directly into another, and if one car has more battery than it needs, it could sell it to the other car. Or you could plug them all together and balance them out. So you can imagine a whole parking lot full of cars. And ostensibly, if your car has more battery than it needs, you could sell that additional charge to the network.
Like a USB hub.
It's an interesting idea. But of course, you
Peer
could
to
also,
peer to peer battery.
yeah.
If you could make the two-way inductive charging work properly to the road and from the road, and you don't lose too much, then potentially you could have, I mean, so a long time ago, a friend talked to me about, tried to tell me that one day cars would be solar and they'd be able to drive down the motorway at 70 mile an hour off solar. I'm like, well, not really. There's not enough roof area to do that sensibly. I mean, sure, if you've got high pressure bicycle tires on in the desert lying on your back in a really low experimental car, maybe. But in a sensible car full of your gear that you expect to perform like a normal car, I don't think that's even physically ever possible to run at motorway speeds off solar because there's just not enough roof area and not enough energy hits the roof. But most cars are parked. I don't know the ratio of parked to driving cars, but let's say it's 10 to 1. If all those parked cars were to generate electricity, conveniently push it into the grid wherever they are at that time, and then also be to get that inductively into cars, which is being tested, that are driving down the highway, the latter bit's being tested, then there is the idea that if every car was generating some energy of its own, for example, then perhaps all cars could run off solar energy because there's enough total car roof area between the parked and driving cars to power all of the currently driving cars potentially. So anyway, it's worth a thought, and certainly sharing vehicle. This also ties into vehicle to grid. The idea that if you look at a typical house battery like a Tesla Powerwall, it's 10 kilowatt hours, but if you look at a typical Tesla, it's 100 kilowatt hours in terms of orders of magnitude. Okay, it's 13 and 85 or whatever. But, sue me. It's 10 in a Powerwall and 100 in a car. The car represents a huge amount of energy storage. So vehicle to grid can make sense. Vehicle to vehicle makes sense. Grid to vehicle obviously is already being done, so really it's cool.
Okay. Oh, the next one from MIT Tech Review. How China's biggest online influencers fell from their thrones. 3 top live streaming personalities which commanded legions of fans who brought billions of dollars worth of goods until they suddenly went dark. It says no one had foreseen just how fast three of China's most powerful influencers would fall. On June 3rd, hold that date in your mind, Austin Lee, a 30-year-old live streamer with over 60 million followers, abruptly cut off a stream after a tank-shaped ice cream dessert appeared on the screen. While he later posted that it was due to technical difficulties, most people understand that it as having triggered government censors who interrupted the stream as the tank-shaped ice cream dessert the government interpreted it as a reference to the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square protests on June 4th. I said hold the date of June 3rd in your mind. So this was the day before the Tiananmen Square massacre anniversary. And because in the background of his live stream there was a cake shaped like a tank, they cut his live stream to his 60 million followers, where he makes billions of dollars, and he's not been seen from since. It says, in China, live streaming e-commerce is a massive industry worth over $180 billion. Combining TV marketing with live stream interaction and convenience made possible by smartphones, the streams drew in 388 million Chinese viewers in 2020. It took the industry half a decade to hit its peak, and influencers like Lee have risen to rival the popularity of A-list celebrities in China. They've been endorsed by the central government as innovators and job creators, and they have been known to facilitate billions of dollars of online purchases in one night. Their status as retail rainmakers has given them immense power over sellers, including giant multinational corporations, influencing who gets featured and what prices should be. But in Lee's and at least 2 other cases, these online empires were toppled overnight in what appears to be a government crackdown. And then it tells the story of the 2 other people who were magically disappeared for, having something in the background that Uncle Xi feels threatened by. I guess that will learn you. That will that'll teach you.
They are not as lucky as Jack Ma. We all see how Jack Ma stepped down. So they're just you can say like salesmen for those online commercial or online shops. So it's so easy to punish them.
As they now realize. As they realize just a little too late, don't have a cake of a tank in the background of your live stream the day before the Tiananmen Square massacre anniversary.
Hey, Tyler, I back
Yes.
channeled something to Cheryl. There have been
Huh?
several articles that have come out, in the last, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, suggesting that some of the influence of these influences in China is waning, not because of the government, just because there's either consumer fatigue or there's too many of them. That that may be. I just read an article the other day. I just can't remember where I read it, that there's this kind of like a decline in their influence in China, and it may portend the decline of influencers in other countries. That maybe we've hit a peak. In terms of that kind of cultural phenomena. I don't know. I mean, I'm just telling you the stories out there on there. Because
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe that's right because there are too many of them. Everybody that's young wants to be an influencer, and that can't always be the case. And once the influencers do not produce sales for the brand, that's the end of their career as an influencer. And the other thing is, a lot of them realize that the amount of content that they have to produce is too exhausting, and they burn out. So it's a combination of things, but if you're thinking of being an influencer as a long-term profession, probably have a backup plan.
I guess it's also part of the laying low movement, the Tangping.
The definition of lay low is a bit different from this case. And in most cases, the Chinese government can always check the not tax, sorry, tax, because tax evasion of those influencers are often like a million scares, $1 million scares. So it's very easy to put them into jail for tax.
Okay. The next is from Katerina from Reuters, that a Chinese district is banning Tesla cars starting in July. Tesla cars from July 1 will be barred from driving into the Chinese coastal district of Baidaihe for at least 2 months. What is going on there?
Do you know
Is it the
why?
cameras again?
Do
Is
you
it the
know why?
cameras again, or is it some other reason?
It says in the let's pin the article to the top of the room. Let's see here. It says
Because they do have the capability of being a US surveillance machine, effectively. They can send video from the exterior and interior cameras back to Tesla, so could be that.
Tesla cars will be prohibited from entering the Chinese coastal district, the site of a secretive annual summer party leadership conclave, for at least 2 months. Starting July 1, a local traffic police official told Reuters on Monday the decision by the authorities comes just weeks after Tesla cars were also barred from driving onto some roads in the central city of Chengdu in early June, which coincided with a visit by President Xi Jinping to the city. I see. So whenever anything of government significance is going on, they ban the cars from going near it long before the event.
It could
Yeah,
be
so
like
in this,
data security issues, I guess.
yeah, I
So
mean,
Well,
in
in
sure
that,
some
it is.
ways we see
They
there.
think the software is sending back information from the Tesla to, Elon Musk or somebody in the United States, and they don't want that.
and the headline, the top story yesterday over the weekend was that there are now audio files of TikTok team members confessing on audio during meetings, more than 80 examples that TikTok uh, of American user data is being sent to China. So, but yet the TikTok's not being banned in the U.S. and maybe more interestingly, the large American media is not even covering the story.
Hey, Tyler, can I just say, I've been using TikTok a lot recently. I mean,
Yep.
when I say using it as a really as a consumer, I'm not posting videos or anything.
Uh-huh.
And I understand why people like it. You know, I
Uh-huh.
find it easier to use. I think it's better than Instagram Reels. And
Yep.
there's a lot of people posting a lot of things on there, and a lot of it is not related to politics or social issue, at least not the stuff that I get in my feed. I guess it also probably depends on what you're looking at. Obviously, I get a lot of stuff related to Las Vegas and things in Las Vegas, and it all seems quite normal. Quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly, it doesn't seem like any of it's like politically motivated by Democrats, Republicans, or by countries. And
Mm-hmm.
it's people talking about their dating lives. It's people talking about restaurants in Las Vegas. I mean, this is a lot of the stuff that I see. Very rarely do I don't really
And
see
that's
what people.
because you didn't search the one you don't want to see. That's the
Oh, oh,
algorithm.
okay. I'm
Yeah,
going
you
to
can
search for
try.
some.
You can
I'm going to
try
search
some,
for
then
things
you'll
related
be
to Chinese
flooded.
politics and see what I
You can
come
try
up with.
some,
Then
yeah, you'll be
okay,
flooded.
yeah.
So the problem isn't that. The problem is you have U.S. military also using TikTok to watch cat videos, and some of those
Yeah,
U.S.
Tyler, even
Uh,
even they switch the older data reserved now in Oracle in the U.S. Actually, they have the access to the data at all. Like the people doesn't need to be in China. Outside China, they still have the access to those data. So
I,
I
I made that
share
abundantly clear already. My point
I
is that there
I
there are people. China is constantly. I don't think people yet understand the degree to which China is stealing intellectual property from anywhere they think they can take valuable intellectual property. So if anybody of interest, although uh, Bibi of all people knows this, everyone in Taiwan is aware how to the amazing degree to which China is trying to get intellectual property from TSMC in Taiwan. Every Taiwanese person is familiar with this. This is a national issue that even the government is talking about on a nearly daily basis. But TSMC, uh, China is targeting any company who has any valuable information. China is trying to get the details of that valuable information. And we're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of companies in America alone. And if they can use the microphone in your device to overhear your password or the camera on your device, or heaven forbid, they have a keylogger built into TikTok and they can see your password as you enter it into some network. Um, this is the problem, Ken. It's not that they're not showing you CCP, socialist propaganda. It's that they're using the device as a corporate espionage tool.
For a
But
country
we,
that's
we,
as
we
long as
but
you
but
have the
Tyler,
app
the reality,
downloaded,
none of this stuff is safe.
whatever.
I mean, excuse me,
No, I think what he's trying to say is as long as you have the app on your phone, even when you're not using, they're listening to you.
yeah, but I tend to be very careful what I say on the phone and everything, so it doesn't. I mean, the problem is that Google gets hacked. So everything gets hacked. Okay, so people have lost their passwords, on American platforms. But I was just thinking, yeah, we just had a shooting. There was a shooting on Fremont Street, downtown in the downtown casino area in Las Vegas. The first place I actually saw a video of the shooting was on TikTok. It wasn't on like a local news. I mean, I have all the local news stations on my phone too. I didn't get it shown it by them. My local newspaper, by the way, even like hours and hours and hours later, didn't have a video of the event, but it was on TikTok, and it wasn't put there by. I mean, I'm not trying to defend the fact. I understand the issue. I'm just trying to say it's getting such widespread acceptance by Americans that it's almost like a freight train. Because these videos I saw about the shooting in Fremont Street were put out there by Americans who happened to be there. It wasn't a Chinese news service. It was there were Americans who were down there, and they had cameras and they took video, and that's how you got to see it. And that's what they used. They weren't using Instagram, and they weren't using YouTube, and they weren't using Vimeo. And I mean at some point it becomes unstoppable unless the government wants to ban TikTok, which is what Trump wanted to do. Then people are going to have to find something else. But there's probably going to be pushback against that from all the people using it.
Okay, my point is China is banning Tesla in at least in some capacities, like 2 months from and driving in a province where there's an event.
I'm not saying
What?
we shouldn't necessarily ban it for security reasons. I'm just giving you the kind of the populist take on it. I understand the
Yeah.
issues you're talking about. I do.
Okay. Next up, seaweed and 3D printers. Chile's innovative approach to feeding kids. Some dehydrated seaweed, some instant mashed up potatoes, and hot water. These are the ingredients for a nutritious menu of 3D printed food. Yeah, That's not a bad idea. Although we have a hard enough time getting kids to eat vegetables. Um, how to get them to eat seaweed outside of Japan and Korea is well, even Thais like seaweed, but we might not have a
Very
choice. But
yummy.
yeah. So the next one says the first West African hydro solar plant has been deployed in Ghana, and that's fantastic. And Russia becomes China's biggest oil supplier. Russia has become China's biggest supplier of oil as country sold discounted crude to Beijing amid sanctions over the Ukraine war. As predicted from the very beginning of the war, China would very happily buy up all of that discounted Russian oil, and indeed they are. And the next is that, and by the way, that is a strong evidence of China benefiting economically from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So make note of that. China is economically benefiting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Tyler, I also read an article, and if I'm very, very quick using this phone, I might be able to locate it again. But the idea that the actual fact that they were benefiting from the oil and the imports into the country, their reporting in their regular statistics did not accurately put out exactly when they got the imports. So they were having imports in March and April, but the numbers only appeared in May. And I bring that up for a number of reasons, which I'm sure regular listeners to this room will understand that China has a motive. China has lots of different motives. And one of the ones that I find particularly unfathomable is the one where statistics are reported at their choosing, and so the alternate facts becomes unimportant, or rather important in a different way. But that sort of dishonesty just is really quite disturbing. That was all. Thank you.
Okay, next up from Saudamini, that Facebook announced the new Avatar store, saying we're launching the Avatar store on Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger, so you can buy digital. You have avatars and buy digital clothes for those avatars that you'll assumingly pay actual money for from actual brands. And then the next one from Saudamini, that the Ola electric scooter company in India, which is booming, is now, this article says the first Ola electric car for India teaser has been launched, likely to debut around 2023. The first Ola electric car for the Indian market has been teased. Here's all you need to know. And if I share the link, you will see the front bumper of the car and nothing else. However, I'm happy to report I got to see the actual photo of the actual car on Friday from one of the gentlemen who is one of Ola's biggest shareholders, who was at the event that I was at over on Thursday and Friday, and he showed me the photo, an actual photo that he took of the actual car. And I have to say, it looks incredibly cool and very innovative design. A very new concept, unlike any other car I've ever seen, but still incredibly cool looking. So it will be very interesting to see how that plays out. The problem is they need batteries. And I found out that Ola's CEO called up my friend Peter Carlson, who has the big battery factory here in Europe, asking him to come down and build a battery factory next to his factory in India. And so we had an interesting discussion about that with this Ola shareholder at this event on Friday. And you never know, I might be heading to India to broker an interesting deal to build one of the world's biggest battery factories next to Ola, if Modi wants to make it easy. And I think he does, because that is of an incredibly important strategic, geopolitical maneuver for him. So we'll see.
Hey, Tyler, I just back channeled something over to Cheryl that we covered here in Tech News when you weren't here last week, but it kind of relates to the subject you're talking about. I mean, in a broader sense, you know, Facebook has this thing called Pixel that a lot of hospitals and doctors are using, and there's now concerns being raised about what they're doing with the data that they're getting from that. And so I just think this issue of you know, you know, privacy and data and all that, it's much bigger than the Chinese issues. I guess we could be, you could argue we could be slightly more comfortable if Zuckerberg has all of our data. I mean, I don't know, but I think that's the bigger problem. The bigger problem is, you know, this concentration of data and everyone asking for every, you know, all this data every time you want to use a service. And the biggest reason is because the stuff is free. So when it's free, you're the product, right? Okay, and they're asking for your emails and all sorts of other identifying things, sometimes that they don't even really need. So I just think it's a much larger problem than TikTok. I mean, I just do. I think it's a problem, but I think it's a much bigger problem than TikTok. And
But
so, you know,
well, as far as we know, I mean, we just read a story 10 minutes ago about one of China's biggest influencers who was selling billions of dollars
yeah,
of products with tens of millions of followers, who has no longer been heard from because he had a fucking cake in the background of his live stream. Ken,
I know that. That's China.
okay,
We know what it is.
right.
I'm not
Well, that's what.
defending. I'm not
That's a
defending the
very. Are we
CCP.
aware of a similar instance with
No,
Facebook?
No,
no.
if you have ever advertised on Facebook, you know that they put out a tracking pixel whenever you buy an ad. And so these tracking pixels are all over the place by now because it's been like that forever, and it tracks the user. And yes, everybody uses them. And I'm not surprised that my medical information is out there. In fact, I knew it was out there. It's just now I know how.
And by the way, that story with the lipstick king, that truly is a Chinese problem. I mean, that's internal to them. It really is. Okay. I mean,
Well, until you fly over China.
okay. I mean,
What happens
I
when
mean,
when you fly an air? It happened with the journalist flying over Belarus. That's a year ago. There was a
we're going to
journal.
live in a world, Tyler. I think we already do. that people probably should be a lot more careful about where they fly and where they go. Does it surprise me that when sometimes Westerners get taken hostage, like the basketball player in Russia? It doesn't surprise me. I mean, we act like we're surprised. Okay, we're going to have to we should have recognized a long time ago some of these governments do this stuff. You go at your own risk. Okay, I mean, this is where it is. There are places that are too dangerous to travel. There are Europeans who've been kidnapped traveling in Algiers. Okay, everybody thinks that they can just go wherever they want all over the globe, and they're stunned that bad stuff happens in certain countries. If you want to be safe, go to Montreal. I mean, I don't know what seriously.
But
Ken,
you're
you're
saving
right. You're
people.
absolutely right. Russia, if it was going to do that, it wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. The fact that it's done that, we can shout and scream. They're going to do what they want. We don't have control, and that's what we got to have do with things that we can do in our own space.
Yeah, well,
And
this
can, just like Tyler said, yeah. I think this is, or both are important, but of course for Americans, your the point you mentioned is also, how to solve it as yeah, how to solve it is should be discussed as well. But I mean, if we don't bring up how China treat those whoever written some offensive word on the internet, and you might be like arrested for that, just for that reason. Yeah, that is a serious
no,
one if you don't know it.
BB, it's
If
less
you,
than that. The live
yeah,
streamer didn't say or write anything.
yeah, no, actually, that tank is put in his hand, and I mean, we have a citizen, Taiwanese citizen, and he's an NGO worker, and he went to China regularly to help some, um, like uh, like those who were suffered from some law issues, and he was arrested for just for something he said, and he spent like 5 years in China and prison for that, and he didn't violate his action didn't had actual violation of laws. So if you don't understand this and you think what you read, what you write, what you post, what your everything on the internet is irrelevant to the possibility of your and the possible arrested issue in China. So I mean, in a time when the national security law of Hong Kong passed, our government actually told us if you ever, if you think you are a Taiwan that is supporter for the Taiwanese independence, you might consider never ever go to transfer or transit from Hong Kong. And yeah, if you are a hardcore Chinese protester or anything you think will be offensive to the CCP government, you think you should think of that when you plan your overseas trip as well. And that's my point.
What
You know,
about the booksellers?
The books we've already covered those headlines, the headlines of the booksellers in Hong Kong.
No, I mean the booksellers who had uh, well, one particular bookseller who was traveling in Thailand and got taken into custody for the Chinese government and possibly by the Chinese government too. But anyhow, he was traveling overseas and in another country, not China or Hong Kong, and he was arrested and taken in China. That's quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the national security law in Hong Kong, how it works.
no, she said it happened in Thailand, didn't she? Just say that.
The national, what BB's referring to is the way that the national security law is worded. It applies globally.
Yeah, we
And,
say
and,
it's a universal law. You can even in the mall and you offended China.
okay, okay, and the Canadians arrested at the behest of the Americans the daughter of the CEO of Huawei. So the Western countries do this, so they do it in retaliation. So you just kind of people just. I mean, this is the world we live in. We're not going to change the whole world. I'm not saying it's good, but we should just acknowledge the world we live in. And you have it. You have this divide between democratic countries and free countries, I mean, non-free countries, and so I mean this is the world we live in. I mean, people just have to adjust and make choices about risk, about what kind of risk are they willing to take for what kind of upside, like anything else in life. I mean. It's not going to change. What are we going to do? We should start World War III with China over this issue. I mean, it's a global superpower. They're going to do what they're going to do, and what we can, I mean, I don't know what that solution is. I
There's
mean,
something about legitimacy, Ken, that really is quite fundamental to this particular scenario of the national security law versus the situation of the chief executive of Huawei living in Vancouver. The extradition laws between Canada and the United States are such that it allows it. Fine, that's a treaty between two countries. However, in the case of this particular chief executive, there was a legitimate concern of what was being questioned about Huawei. And so that's, okay, maybe my interpretation of legitimate is different, but somebody who's selling books in a shop in Hong Kong before it was illegal to sell books in Hong Kong was selling books about China, about generic books about China and about the government there, and got done. These
oh,
shops got
oh,
closed
oh,
down.
okay. So what happened? So let me get into this. So what happened in the situation with the Huawei executive had to do with the fact that supposedly they violated Iranian sanctions, American sanctions on Iran. So the United States takes this, whatever you want to call it, egotistical thing that when we tell you you can't do business with Iran, nobody can do business with Iran. Do you know if there's actually an American law on the books that every president has been waiving for the last six or so presidents that would actually make it a felony, even for a Canadian, by the way, to go to Cuba or to do any business with Cuba because we have sanctions on Cuba that even our Western allies don't have, and the law is written in such a way that if there was a Canadian that we found out that was doing business with Cuba, we should arrest the Canadian in Florida if we can. And obviously, that would create a political problem. So the last five or six, or maybe more American presidents that have existed since that law passed, basically just waive the law. Whether they have the authority to, I don't know, but they just basically don't enforce the law, so we shouldn't have a situation with our friends in Canada and England and other countries that don't accept our view of Cuba. Okay, I mean, it's I countries do these things. I'm not saying they're good. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying it's perfect. But to just say, well, only the Chinese do it. The Americans do some stuff like this too. Maybe not to the same extent. Okay, but why don't we respect? Who are we to arrest a Canadian because the Canadians have a different view of Cuba than we do? But we have a law in the
But
books
we're not.
about
We're
that.
not. But are we do? You're proposing something that I'm not aware has happened.
We actually have the law. The only reason I
I
will
know we
send
have
you.
the law. We've not
We've not enforced it, but I'm going to send you.
not
I'm going to
enforced it.
send you. I'm going
I'm
to
aware
send
of the
you.
law. Yeah,
You're
I've
aware
been
of the law.
accused.
I'm going to send you
I'm
something
very
on
aware.
the president. Oh,
But
okay. There you go. Yeah.
you proposed that we're arresting Canadians. We're not arresting Canadians. We've not arrested Canadians, and I would wager anything you want to wager that we're not going to be arresting
Until one day
Canadians.
we have a president that decides. Let's put it this way: the guy who wrote the law, even though he's dead, it was Senator Jesse Helms. If Jesse Helms became president, he probably wouldn't waive the law if he was alive. Okay,
Right.
and then it would
But
be
let's look,
enforced.
Ken, to give the proper, you know, debate on this point. That America has extradited people, but we should list the ones we're aware of. It was Huawei for doing business in Iran, and China says they're abiding by the Iranian sanctions. But in this case, it was revealed they weren't, and so we acted on that. The other one that I think is really worth mentioning is Julian Assange, which, by the way, the UK just decided they are going to extradite to the US after, holy shit, what an incredible rigmarole he had to go through. And
And
the,
even so, even so, one
Yeah.
wonders how secure that judgment is. and why
Right,
it was done.
right. And I think it's
And,
rather
and
egregious what
Tyler,
the
you
games that
guys,
the
we can't
I will.
extradite you guys. That's just not fair.
Okay, but my point is the U.S. is extraditing people, but let's look at the ones that they're actually doing. It's they tried to do Snowden. He's hiding in Russia. We've been trying forever to do Assange, and we finally got it. It appears, it seems, in the recent ruling in recent days. And uh, Meng from Huawei. I'm sure there are several others, but those are the first that come to my mind. Certainly the most high-profile ones. And I think they're agree. I think those are. I would be just for the record. I don't think we should be extraditing those folks for those things, but those are in each of those instances. Uh, I think you would agree rather high-profile type of things where rather national interests are involved. In the case of the Hong Kong bookseller, can we really compare a bookstore owner, in Causeway Bay, which is where they were, to WikiLeaks or the CFO of Huawei? To me, it's a not a really, uh, you know, app level of national interest comparatively.
I think
Um,
sometimes
I just, I
also
just,
sometimes okay, go
I
ahead,
just
Philip.
back channel something to Cheryl. I haven't even read the whole text of it, but apparently Trump, when he was president, failed to waive all of those provisions of the Helms Act regarding Cuba. So it doesn't really deal with extradition. It deals with the ability to, private citizens or whatever people to sue companies, even sue American companies for certain transactions with Cuba. So, like I said, all you have to have is a change in president. And my only point is every country has its own interest, and countries do what they do to whatever they do to defend what they believe their own interest. But we apparently Trump is not waiving, or he did when he was in office, did not waive all of the elements of that previous presidents did. So you know. It's a very complicated issue. That's
You're absolutely right, Ken, and I really appreciate that all the points you brought up are legitimate questions to be asked about the whole situation. However, I personally just feel that it is down to individual approaches to human rights and how we see the importance of our own individual human rights. I could go and break the law and do something really, really horrible and nasty about any country, whether it's America or China or Brazil or wherever. But if it's within a level of respect of human rights, and I'm allowed to do it by the international human rights laws that we're all supposed to have signed up to, all the countries, well, a lot of the countries of the UN, I find it very, very hard that some fundamental rights are not respected by whatever country. Yeah, it might be America, it might be wherever, but at the moment, it seems that China is doing a lot of it.
Oh, I'm not saying they should get a Nobel Prize. I'm not defending the CCP. I'm just realistic of the world we live in, and that they're a global economic and military power, and I don't think we're going to be starting World War III over this. So we need
No,
to
we're
learn
not.
how to live. It's like COVID. We're going to need to learn to live with it somehow.
Right. No, but what we are doing is it's with the issue of the Uyghurs and others, it's come too far, and where the issue that we really are reacting to is China. It was clearly understood wants to challenge the dollar, and that's America's red line, and that's why, and so did Russia, and it was Russia and China working, and it was a bit of Iran as well, who wanted to challenge the dollar, and that's why it was the world's easiest prediction that interesting shit was going to start happening with Russia and the U.S. And sure enough, interesting shit is happening with Russia and the U.S. And it was a very easy prediction that would spill over into China. And interesting shit is on the brink of happening between the U.S. and China. And this is because the U.S. really has one very key issue above all others, which is its position with the dollar, and the countries that have crossed that line in the past found out the hard way what happens when you
And I
when
agree
you
with you on the dollar. And by the way, there are Americans who are challenging the supremacy of the dollar with crypto. They're trying. The
sure.
whole concept behind crypto is that they think that dollar's going to decline, whatever. So we have Americans trying to challenge the dollar. Never mind what the Chinese are doing.
Yeah.
Tyler,
So
I think we have a new
yes.
speaker on stage that join
Okay.
us for this topic. Okay, cool.
Okay. Okay. I want to read.
Right.
Jeff G just shared an article from the South China Morning Post. Let me check the date on it. It says June 20th, which would be today, but I just want to make sure. Yes, this article's from today from South China Morning Post. I got to share it with you so that you don't think I'm insane, because the headline says mind reading device to detect porn could speed China's policing of illicit content, says researchers. Electronic engineering team combined the power of humans and AI to create a prototype device that could sound an alarm when an indecent image appears. But an observer says there is no law to regulate the use of such objects, which could be used by sensors or to protect the data they collect. So, a device that can detect when a man is watching pornography by reading his mind, it says in the article, has been developed in China, according to a research team in Beijing behind the project. The device, which could speed up the work of sensors trying to spot indecent images on the Chinese internet, is worn on the head by the subject and can pick up a spike in the brain waves triggered by illicit content, according to the researchers.
That's
So maybe
How?
maybe
amazing.
there's a
Now,
Neuralink.
Just
Neuralink.
don't put it on your head, right?
Yeah.
thought crime now is illegal in China. It's official. That's awesome.
So, how long before China forces people to wear um, brainwave measuring devices to control their fucking thoughts? Ken?
Okay, and when they do that, Tyler, what do you think the American response should be to them doing it? I mean, we could say,
Nothing.
okay.
I honestly don't give a shit. My point is, how many years out do you think this is, or how likely do you think it is?
Well,
Give it sounds absolutely scientific, sci-fi, dystopian, fantasy fiction. However, given the recent history of China's moves in this regard, it's well within the realm of possibility. Which is that to me is the really bizarre aspect of this. I would, yeah,
Well,
Tyler,
nobody cares really if someone's watching porn. It's their other thoughts
correct,
that people care.
right.
I think here's what's upsetting to me is that it's not equal. What do you mean? Only men?
Yes, only men are watching porn.
so Tyler, Evan put something in our tech news, the little news thing that
Uh-huh.
we have in the back, and he
Yep.
showed like people like basically like climbing out of a building with rope to get around the quarantine, whatever you want to call it, the lockdowns in Shanghai. And so, what some of the stuff has shown with some of these COVID lockdowns in China, there's a point that the people there will rebel. Okay, despite the
We're
power.
on the same. We are on the same page there. That was literally the next thought in my mind, which is,
Exactly.
if
So
yeah,
ultimately, the Chinese people need to deal
I
with
agree,
this,
a
not us.
thousand percent.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We're on the same page there. I think even for Chinese folks, this would be a bridge too far. Like if they start forcing people to wear some kind of brainwave headset, I think you'll see that. I would hope that would be the point when the Chinese decide to attempt, you know, uh,
What?
Respectfully, I would disagree.
But Tyler, what if Uncle Shi realized that porn is actually good for birth rate? Do you think he will relax his
it's not.
stance?
It's clearly not though. Yeah.
Can I sort of be bold and deviate ever so slightly? Because Ken does have a point. I mean,
Yeah, I think so.
the folks on the stage who are from the UK, and those of you others from other parts of the world, you may not be aware overseas that we have had a very interesting situation here, where our government has chartered an aeroplane to take refugees who have crossed the channel on little dinghies and boats with holes or whatever. They've come over, they've appeared on the shores of the United Kingdom and are therefore not eligible, apparently, to apply to stay here. And so this plane was chartered to send them off to Rwanda to be encamped there while whatever happens. And who knows if they'd ever come back, or maybe they'd have to stay in Rwanda and whatever. But the point is that a refugee, an asylum seeker, is under international convention law allowed to be a refugee asylum seeker. And you can claim. And of course, there are many arguments that the present UK government is arguing that no, they have to claim status in France, etc., etc. And there are lots of pros and cons about that. But the fact that the basic fundamental right of that person was negated and they were lifted and planned to be sent off to Rwanda, which is unlike anywhere they wanted to go to, and they were going to be sent there. And at the very last minute, the Supreme Court in the UK hedged and hummed, and then it was the European Court of Justice who eventually said, no, this flight cannot take off while there is a judicial review pending about whether even the policy of sending refugees and asylum seekers to Rwanda is legitimate, legally possible, and correct. So that was how that situation ended. But apparently the plane is still sitting there, and the Home Office is still collecting numbers and names and people to actually put on the next flight out as soon as they can oil it up, gas it up. But there we are. UK. The UK.
Hey,
And Tyler, what I'm
there's
sorry.
someone in
Go,
the
go
back
ahead.
channel that just shared. For your reference, I have a friend who is police in charge of internet crime. He told her that they did check. They did check every text through WeChat. So if you care about your safety or human rights, don't use app from China like WeChat and TikTok, etc.
Hey, Tyler, on the story
Hmm.
that is pinned at the top, didn't we cover a story several months ago that one of our American companies, probably Facebook or something, had some technology, maybe Apple, one of the American companies had some technology also to try to detect, child porn or something, and or it was maybe even trying to be written into into federal laws, and then there were issues about how accurate it was. If people want to talk about breast cancer, I mean, this has happened on our own, censoring already, like issues like breast cancer. All of a sudden, they see the word breast, it becomes pornographic. You can't talk about that. People post pictures of their little babies getting baths and stuff. Okay, this is where it is. So I think there was pushback against that, and it wasn't done. So when you pin this thing up that, well, China's going to have mind reading devices. I mean, we weren't talking about mind reading devices. We were talking about, I guess, pictures and trying to figure out from pixels and whatever on social media. But that's only one step, short of that. Zuckerberg's building the metaverse. So if he was willing to, come up with some software to figure
Yeah.
out whether a picture is pornographic, where you when you're wearing your Oculus headset, he's
Yeah.
probably going to figure that out also.
Yeah, but we can't even get Texas to wear fucking masks, let alone a headset. China could force people to wear headsets with no problem.
You don't even need a headset. There is a company that makes earplugs that monitors brain activity. For now, they are working on monitoring epilepsy. So for people that have epilepsy, that it would give an early warning that an episode is coming up, and they could, stop driving, whatever would be risky to be doing while you have an epilepsy episode. But they are also going into the mental health branch, and I think it's only a matter of time that those earbuds could also monitor other, more like more content of the thoughts. So you don't need even a headset. You could put that on your in your earbuds, on your headphones, and yeah, the question is how we
regulate those. We need to regulate this. I was heard of this folk song, German folk song, that the thoughts are free, that you can tell me what to do and everything else, but thoughts are free and nobody can know them. This is not true anymore. It's a very old folk song. I don't know if anybody knows it, but yeah, this is just not true anymore in the future, and we need to regulate that somehow.
Okay,
I'm
I
pretty
gotta run. Go ahead,
sorry,
Ben.
go ahead, Tola. No, it's okay. And if you got to run, you got to run.
I got 3 minutes to do 6 articles, but then everyone can talk because I'm going to be walking and listening after I read these next six. So Facebook loses an appeal in a Russian court over being called an extremist. A Moscow court on Monday rejected Facebook's appeal after it was found guilty of extremist activities in Russia. And why was it found guilty of extremist activities? Well, because they weren't removing the content that Russia demand they move about Navalny, etc. So they're extremists over there at Facebook because they don't remove content that Russia doesn't like. So the next one is Israel funds 3 new innovative energy tech projects dealing with the climate crisis. The purpose of the grants is to promote the economy and to develop Israeli high tech in the fields of energy and water. Oh, wow. Energy and water. The next is from Saudamini, that the first Ola car for India teaser is launched. I saw the car, it's gorgeous. And the next is from BB Tencent forms a extended reality unit as metaverse race gathers steam in China. And I'm sure they have nothing to worry about. Robot boats gobble plastic waste from Vietnam to Malaysia. Sponsored by Coldplay, Coca-Cola, and Kia. Funding trash hunting autonomous boats, vessels in Asian rivers that gobble up plastic. Very cool. So that's it for the tweets for today. I'm going to keep listening, and we can keep it going. If anyone else has other tweets they want to share, or we can save it for tomorrow. Anyone with a tweet? We'll do it for tomorrow. Okay, fair enough. So we'll catch you manana. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.